in Advent, week 3. We lit the pink candle. That tells you we're in week 3 of Advent, which is joy. Isaiah 35 is our text this morning. And we've gone over hope, peace. Now we hit joy. Now, I found this story this week in an article. I didn't write it, but I liked it. Here it goes. It says, this is by a guy named Sam Wells. A friend of mine went to medical school and at the tender age of 21 found himself, for the first time in his life, in a delivery room where a mother was giving birth to a baby boy. He'd always assumed that giving birth was a somewhat painful experience. I didn't write this, just so we're clear again. It was a somewhat painful experience. I'm quite certain it is. So he was very surprised that the mother entered the final stages of the birth screaming, "Joy, joy, joy." A couple of hours later, with the baby safely born and the mother now holding the treasured new life, my friend had the chance to speak with her. "I was so moved," he said, "to hear your shouting for joy with all your heart." "You do have a lot to learn," she said. "I was shouting for joy because I was in agony. Joy is the name of my midwife." The point this morning, we're talking about joy. The point is going to be you need to find joy in order to express joy, first of all. And I think that it's important once you've found joy, you've got to express joy. And so you need to find joy to express joy, and living joyfully is living into God's plan. That's living into God's future for the world. So that's where we're going. We're talking about joy. We're looking at Isaiah 35. We're going to define joy to begin with. I went to the authority, the internet, this week to find out what joy is. And I started with dictionary.com. Here's what they have, and I think it was good. The first definition is, joy is the emotion of great delight or happiness caused by something exceptionally good or satisfying. And I think that's important because it gets us at the emotional level of joy. There is an emotion about joy. The second one, and I hope these are behind me. All right, good. The second one is, joy is a source or cause of keen pleasure or delight. That is, something or someone greatly valued or appreciated. So we have joy as an emotional content, if you will, the emotional content of it. Joy, the source of it, as something valuable or important. And then third is joy is the expression or display of glad feelings. So you have the emotional, you have the value of joy, where you find it, and then you have the expression of joy. And it's that expression of joy that probably hits more at the what we'd find in the Old Testament, and we're going to stick there since we're working with Isaiah, the Old Testament notions of joy. If you were to look at it at a very high level, what you find in the Old Testament in general is that there's a wide variety of use or uses of the word joy, and there are a lot of derivatives. It's an important concept in the Old Testament. There's certainly an emotional or an inner emotional concept about joy. I was expressing my joy too much, I think. Wait, I learned last time. There's an inner emotion about joy, but the Old Testament picture has a lot more to do with expressing joy rather than residing on the inside. It's the feeling of joy coming out, or it's joy being shown. And joy often in the Old Testament has a national outlook, not simply a personal outlook. There is that personal part, but the national part seems to be stressed a lot more. And national prosperity and the expressions of joy from that are what you find. So in that sense, joy as a quality goes far beyond just sort of inner emotions and inner feelings. It goes to things being better than they were before, or at least the hope that they're going to be better than they were before. There's a concern with a higher good than there was. And that's the idea of joy in the Old Testament. Now, keep that in mind. We're going to walk into Isaiah 35. I'm going to give you just a history sketch this week. It's not a lesson like the last 2 weeks. So let's just get ourselves into it. We already know, if you've been here the last couple weeks, we're in a divided kingdom. It's now Israel in the north, Judah in the south. Isaiah is the prophet for the south side. He's with Judah and Jerusalem. Assyria is the big world superpower. They've conquered virtually everybody. And Egypt, FYI, has been stoking up the fire to get everybody to attack Assyria. So they're the two big superpowers really battling each other. But Egypt's trying to avoid all of that. And so everybody's been conquered by Assyria. Judah asked Assyria for help, so they weren't conquered, but they're paying tribute, so they're as good as conquered. And Judah itself is pretty much in ruins because they've been kind of attacked by everybody in this time. The kings of Judah have all been unfaithful up until now, turning to other gods. Whoever happens to be the god of the hour, that's who they worship. And by the time we get to Isaiah 35, then some changes occur, positive, as it were. Hezekiah becomes king, and we learn about him that he was one of the few good kings Judah had. He tore down the high places. That's a good sign. He said, we're done worshiping these other gods. And if you read from 2 Kings, it says Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before him or after him. He held fast to the Lord and did not stop following him. He kept the commands the Lord had given Moses, and the Lord was with him. He was successful in whatever he undertook. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. So by this point, we have a new king in Assyria as well. Our old friend Tiglath-Pileser III, who I mentioned the last couple weeks, is gone. Sennacherib is ruling. And as you can see, Hezekiah is taking a stand. He says, we're not going to pay tribute anymore. We're not going to sit under you anymore. You're not our conqueror. You're not our ruler, which of course makes Assyria angry. That's the setting. And so we get into Isaiah 35, and you can turn to it if you'd like. That would be nice. It won't be up on the screen. I'm just going to read it. I'll remind you, if you are turning to it, I'm using the new NIV, which is a little different than the Bible in the pews. Isaiah 35. It says, the desert and the parched land will be glad. The wilderness will rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus, it will burst into bloom. It will rejoice greatly and shout for joy. The glory of Lebanon will be given to it, the splendor of Carmel and Sharon. They will see the glory of the Lord, the splendor of our God. Strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear. Your God will come. He will come with vengeance. With divine retribution, he will come to save you. Then will the eyes of the blind be opened and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then will the lame leap like a deer and the mute tongue shout for joy. Water will gush forth in the wilderness and streams in the desert. The burning sand will become a pool, the thirsty ground bubbling springs. In the haunts where jackals once lay, grass and reeds and papyrus will grow. And a highway will be there. It will be called the way of holiness. It will be for those who walk on that way. The unclean will not journey on it. Wicked fools will not go about on it. No lion will be there, nor any ravenous beast. They will not be found there. But only the redeemed will walk there. And those the Lord has rescued will return. They will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. Now, I want to give special attention to verses 8 through 10, but let's do a quick run through verses 1 through 7 to see if anything we should have picked up along the way. First, in the very beginning, you have the whole wilderness bit, and there is a little bit of, as you find all throughout the Old Testament, Exodus-type language in there. Deliverance from the wilderness. Whenever you see that in the Old Testament, don't miss it. They're pointing back to the Exodus. But verse 2 begins to get us into areas where we may be less familiar. It talks about Lebanon, Carmel, and Sharon, or Sharon if you want to say it that way, which are the lush, fertile regions referenced throughout the Old Testament that represent sort of bounty and beauty. And according to Numbers 34, those areas are part of the Promised Land. So they're pointing to these high points in their own Promised Land that currently now are probably desolate or at least empty of a good chunk of people. Not everybody, but they've been emptied to some degree. And they're pointing to those, saying that's the hope, that the whole place will be lush and beautiful like those places are. Go to verse 3, and it says, strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. And verse 4 continues, say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear. your God will come. And so it's encouraging them, look, God is coming to save you, and he's coming with a vengeance when he comes. So be ready. Take comfort in that. That's why you're strengthening these feeble hands and keeping the knees steady. Don't let them knock. God's coming. Take comfort. And then verses 5 through 7 pick up some of what verse 2, I think, was picking up as well. That which was promised has been destroyed. We know that which was beautiful is out of reach. Lebanon, Carmel, Sharon, mentioned in verse 2. They just look like they're a dream right now, but the images in 5 through 7 are great, aren't they? The lame are going to leap like a deer. The mute, they're going to shout for joy. Look at that. Joy is already there. Water is going to be in the desert, streams flowing. And in the wilderness, burning sand is all of a sudden going to become a pool of water. These dark edges of the world are now going to be fruitful and useful all of a sudden. And there's something about this coming joy. It's important to see here. And it's not just that things are going to be good when the coming joy is there. It's that they're going to be great, aren't they? They're going to be better all of a sudden than they were. And I'll give you more on this in a moment. That's verses 1 through 7, the quick fly through. Now let's get to 8. Verse 8, and a highway will be there. It will be called the way of holiness. It will be for those who walk on that way. The unclean will not journey on it. Wicked fools will not go on it. Now, much of this chapter, like so much of Isaiah, looks ahead, I think, into the future. Exile, the northern kingdom of Judah is in exile. They've been conquered, and their people have been, as the Assyrians like to do, sent away. That was a way to control the population, right? So you conquer an area, and if the people won't stand under control, you take the cream of the crop, the people that made the decisions, the wealthy ones, and you send them somewhere else. Some of them go to the homeland, some go to other parts of the empire, and then you can more easily control things. So northern Israel, they're the northern kingdom, has been sent away. Judah hasn't been exiled, and they know nothing of this yet. That'll happen later. And that happens under a different superpower, the Babylonians, who come next. But as I look at this text, it looks ahead. It could look ahead towards a number of moments. It could look ahead, like some people want to say, towards the coming back from exile that these guys don't even know about. But I think, as with other parts of Isaiah we've read, it's looking ahead not just to the Messiah, but to that final picture of what God is going to do at the very end. There's a picture of the ultimate joy to come, something that's not going to be realized until the second advent, the second coming of the Messiah. But what's nice is, and what I like about how God does prophecy, is he doesn't just leave that for some future, leaving the past or leaving the present people without some hope, right? There's hope in this passage for those who read it even then. There's comfort no matter the circumstances. Because if you look at this, the encouragement is to stay strong. There's a highway called the way of holiness. That's what the text says. In the ancient Near East, the world of the Old Testament, there were roads that were specific leading to temples, and those roads were supposed to be traveled by people who were worthy, priests or dignitaries or whatever. And that's the type of imagery that's being used here. There's a way like this that's going towards what God has planned, that's going towards this ultimate joy. You'll be able to go down that if you're the redeemed. If you stay faithful, you can walk that road. And that's the encouragement for now, not just for later. You have to believe that this joy is coming. You have to believe that there's a plan. You have to look to the one who's going to save, and you can't be like the past kings, right? You can't sell out to other gods. You can't worship other people. You've got to stay clean, and you've got to be obedient on the path if you want to walk that way of holiness that's coming. You walk it now, not just later. That's verse 8. Verse 9, what will the travel on this road be like then? Verse 9 tells us, no lion will be there, no ravenous beast. They will not be found there, but only the redeemed will walk there. It reiterates the same point, but what are our road hazards today? I mean, if you thought through those. I've driven across Texas, I don't know how many times. I've never seen a live armadillo, but I've seen a lot of armadillo across Texas. They're always, I don't know if they're just that slow or not. My hope is to see a live one someday. Around here, you can clearly run into a deer, right? I've seen plenty of squirrels that couldn't make up their mind, and so it was made up for them by a car. Those are road hazards we have around here, right? Colorado, we occasionally have to stop for mountain goat herd, if you're up in the mountains. Or here, this might get closer to it. I remember hiking about 13 years ago in northern Colorado on a kind of a wet trail. And as I was walking, I saw the tracks across. And they were clearly mountain lion tracks. And I clearly went the other way. They were fresh. And I said, this is not a place for me. That's kind of the road hazard kind of thing they're talking about, right? No lion will be there, nor any ravenous beast in this time, especially in a war-torn area or an area that's been ravaged by war. There are probably more hazards than there would be, but even so, in that day and age, there were hazards. You could get eaten while you were walking somewhere if you weren't careful. It can happen even today if you're not careful in certain places. That's not going to happen on this road. This road is free of those things and that kind of adversity. You don't have to worry about that. But again, only the redeemed are going to walk on that road. Those who have chosen to remain steadfast in the Lord. This isn't the stuff of deathbed conversions or what I like to call Al Capone theology, right? Where you can do whatever you want, go to confession on the weekend, and then do it again next week. You wipe the slate clean. It's not that kind of thing. You have to stick with it. You have to remain in the Lord. And just like verse 3 says, stop your shaking knees, calm your hands. Trust and believe that God has something. Move in that direction. And this verse continues into verse 10, and those the Lord has rescued will return. There you can hear that return from exile language there. They will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. Now, this is putting the cart ahead of the horse in some ways, right? Because Judah, if this is simply about exile, Judah hasn't been exiled yet. So it's an interesting passage to be delivered to them at this time. Israel, of course, has, so we could easily look at this and say, well, this is about a return, and maybe even greater, about a reunification of everything, looking together for a homecoming of the exiles and the two kingdoms coming together. But it seems bigger than that still, if you look at it in context of the whole. It just seems bigger. Like last week, we talked about peace. The picture was bigger than a generic earthly peace. This week, there's something bigger. God is truly redeeming, not simply rescuing people. He's making things better, not simply returning them to status quo, if you catch what he's doing. I don't know if you've heard the joke, but there's the one about the patient goes to the doctor and he says, "Doctor, will I be able to play the violin after the operation?" Doctor says, "Yes, of course." Patient says, "Great, I never could before." It's the kind of idea here. All of a sudden, things are going to be better than they were before. It says that. It says, everlasting joy is going to crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing are going to go away. Joy is the standard of victory here. Sorrow and sighing are all of a sudden a thing of the past. And as I was looking at this week, I thought, man, this preaches really well. I like this. How does it live, though? I mean, if you look at this, how does it live? I think how it lives is this: find joy. You have to look for joy to find joy, or to express joy, and you need to find it in the first place. So there are different types of joy I was talking about in the Old Testament, right? There's the individual joy and the corporate joy. The individual joy concept in the Old Testament is there, but it's often a national, a community outlook, as you'd find it with so many things in the Old Testament. So they're excited about, they have joy in military victories, crowning of kings, dedication of buildings, feasts, ultimately in how God has looked out for them as a people. That's where their joy comes from. And joy is found in different things, even in our own lives. Obviously, we can have different levels of joy. I was thinking about this week. We can have a low level of joy. Let's take some examples of that. People tell you that if you're giving presents to kids at Christmas, especially little ones, you might as well just wrap a box, right? Because that's what they're going to play with. They get great joy out of those kind of things, don't they? And some people think we grow out of that. I don't think I ever did. But some people think we grow out of that kind of joy. I think we can find joy, because I think that's joy, in low-level things. Some people find great joy in organizing, right? They love an organized space, and that will give them great joy. Others find joy in fixing things, others recreation, those kinds of things. We can find a level of joy there. But then there's high-level joy, right? Those things that are really, I think, the most meaningful, valuable things. Celebrating a life well lived, right? At a funeral, a memorial. I think there's a tremendous amount of joy that can come from that, especially as we celebrate people going home. and celebrate those lives. Giving to someone that's truly in need. I think there's a tremendous sense of joy from that. We get great joy in our family from giving to a compassion child every month. I like doing that. That's one of my favorite, if you call it a bill, to pay. I like that feeling of helping our friend in Colombia. And you know what's greater? I like it when she sends us a letter that says, I've been praying for you. And I know she has, a little 7-year-old. Of course, our greatest joy comes from salvation through Jesus Christ. That's a high-level joy. But you have to look for joy to find it. And some of us find joy in the little things as much as the big things. And for some of us, that's really easy to find joy in those little things and the big things. I consider myself one of the people who finds joy in the littler things fairly easily. I think I've told you this story before, but about a year and a half ago, I took a personal retreat and I went to a mountain cabin and sat in a chair for 2 hours at the beginning of that retreat and just stared out the window and prayed and watched a bird fly in the air and just wind through the trees for 2 hours. It was glorious. That was a joyful experience for me. Some of you say, was 2 hours enough? And others of you will say, how could you make it for 2 hours? Joy in the little things. That was a little thing. This is easy for some, harder for others. And I'm not putting any kind of quality on where you qualify in that. Some people find joy in the bigger things and the little things much more easily. Others of us tend to be a bit like Eeyores when it comes to joy, right? When he loses his tail, well, I didn't really deserve a tail anyways. It was too nice for me. Or the cup is always half empty. The sun's always going to go behind the clouds. Rain is always going to come. I liked the Family Circus, if you know that little circular comic. A number of years ago, they had one in there where all the kids are standing there on a boat looking at Chicago, the skyline of Chicago. You see all the buildings, and one of them says, I can't see the skyline. All the buildings are in the way. Right? And that's how some of us are. Joy is fleeting. It's elusive. It's always there on the edge, or it's just too big to perceive or something like that. And if you're going to find joy at all, I think you've got to start by looking at the little things that you have that are joyful or things that bring you joy. Make time to discover joy that's already around you. This week, I took time to do some of this. I looked at my calendar over the last while, and I realized I've been gone at night meetings and a lot of different things for a while, so I said, all right, I'm going to take a little time with the 2 oldest ones. And so I picked one up from school, took her out on a little date for yogurt, frozen yogurt, and went the next day and picked up the other one and went for Starbucks. That's finding joy in little things. We spent time together in those things that bring joy, those things of value. And you've got to spend quality time with those things or those people in your life where joy is found, even in the littlest of ways. That's not the extent of joy. That's the start of finding the bigger joy in life. But you've got to discover it somehow. And a question to ask is, how has God blessed you with things that matter? Or how has God blessed you with things that have meaning and value? And then are you spending time with those? Are you finding joy in those? The other thing about finding joy is when you find it, whether big or small, hold on to it. Hold on to it when you find it. Judah was unfaithful. Up until Isaiah 35, we discovered that they were quite unfaithful. Even with the bright moment of King Hezekiah, they would eventually be exiled because of routine disobedience and unfaithfulness. They tried to find joy in other places, or they missed joy altogether. They didn't hold to the joy they should have had in God. They just worshipped other things and were unfaithful. They didn't stay on that road of holiness, the holy way. When you even find a little joy, hold on to it and work to grow that joy and grow it in God's faithfulness. Now, of course, the question, how do you grow the joy? I think one of the ways to grow joy is a habit that's helpful. Ask God for joy. Of course, I could say that about everything. Pray for, and then, put that at the end of it. Pray for this. And that's part of my sermon every week. Pray for joy. Put that on your notes. But besides that, when you're praying for joy, you have to listen to God, which is part of prayer, in my opinion. And this is one of those things that I think is so fruitful when you do it, but it's so missed out on. Start your day and say to God, God, I want to find joy today. Show me what I need to be joyful about today. Show me where my joy is found in you today. And as you pray that And as you ask that he would show you that, as you ask that you would listen, in fact, to what God has for you, it's incredibly effective. God will actually show you, I believe. I've had this happen in my own life where you ask and say, God, I want to hear you. And in fact, he will. Now, we have to be open to that. That's part of the prayer. Look at this more as a discipline, not simply as a reaction, right? Try this as a regular thing. God, I want to see joy. I want to understand where my joy is. I want to value the joy I have in you. Show me how to do that. Then I think just as important, if not more important than finding joy, is you need to express joy. So you need to find it to express it. That's important. And when you find it, actually do. Express it. Let that joy out. One commentator I read this week, he said, in the Old Testament, joy is a sound, not a state of mind. I like that. Joy is a sound, not a state of mind. You read the Psalms. We read one this morning. People shout, people cheer, people make a joyful noise. If you read our text this morning, which you did, I read it for you, you saw that the wilderness shouted for joy, as well as the mute tongue shouted for joy. That's what they do. It's a sound. It's not simply a state of mind or of being. I'll hear people say things like, I learned something, but I don't remember it. Have you heard this before? And of course, you have to ask the question, did you really learn it then? If you don't remember it. And it's the same way with joy, right? If you're joyful, you'll show it. You'll express it. It will come out. Living joyfully is important. It's important to express that joy because living joyfully, expressing that joy is living into God's plan. John Ortberg, in an article I read this week, said, if Jesus is right, he's talking about Jesus and joy at this point. He says, if Jesus is right, joy was at the beginning, was challenged in the middle, and will be restored at the end. If he was wrong, joy is a momentary illusion that was absent in the beginning and will soon be forever stilled. He says, I believe Jesus was right. See, there will always be challenges to our joy, but that was God's intent, right? Joy is so essential to God's story. His plan for history. Joy was there in the beginning. Joy is consistently challenged, yes, even now, whether it's Isaiah or whether it's today. Joy is challenged, but the picture we're given says it's going to be restored in the end. And we need to be a part of that. We need to be involved in that and on that path of joy. So how do you know if you're truly joyful about something? I think your reaction will show. I think the amount of time you spend with things will show if you're joyful about something. If something is worth being joyful about, it's worth expressing that joy. And our joy must be found in where God is taking history. Our joy must be found in the love expressed by God through Jesus Christ. Through that love, God gives us joy. Sorrow goes away, sighing leaves, just like the text says. Joy will be the hat on your head. You'll want to wear it and show it to everybody. You need to find joy to express joy, and living joyfully is living into God's plan. Let's pray together. God, give us joy. Whether it's small or big, help us see why we have reason to be joyful. Help us find our value in you. Keep us steadfast in walking that way of holiness. We know it's a future hope, but it's a reality even now. God, keep us in that joy that will keep us on that path, and help us hear you. As we walk into this week, help us hear your voice and help us see the ways that you can make us and have made us truly joyful. God, if we call ourselves followers of your Son, Jesus Christ, how could we not be joyful and how could we not express that joy? Help us as we do that. And Father, for those of us who have not yet found that joy, may it not be elusive anymore. May we be ready for it. May we hear that. May we receive that joy, God, even today. We pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.